Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this institution, the United States House of Representatives, enjoys a rich heritage that continues to inspire. Through these magnificent halls and this great chamber, celebrated American leaders have walked. Presidents have rallied a nation, and monumental policy debates have echoed throughout the night to forge America's great history. This building, right here, is the fulfillment of what our founding fathers sought when skirmishes first broke out on the fields of Lexington and Concord nearly 2.5 centuries ago. It's what each succeeding generation of Americans has stepped forward to safeguard in their own way. And it is what we have been entrusted to build on and ultimately gift to our children. Here we are, working each and every day to prove ourselves worthy of the country we inherited, the people we are here to represent, and the limitless future we hope to build. Mr. Speaker, I decided to run for Congress just over 3.5 years ago, the basement of my home serving as our team's first office. We didn't have much space or even a sign on the street, but we were all driven by the idea and firm belief that our country's best days are in front of us, that we can get our economy roaring again, that we can continue confidently as the best hope for leading the world. It has been quite a journey from that humble start to working here in the United States Capitol each and every day. But the great thing about America is that this story isn't so unique. Since our nation's very inception, we have always been a place where what starts out as small gatherings of concerned citizens, individuals getting together to discuss and plan how to make our country even better, can grow with hard work and dedication to actually achieve some of those very things. I first ran for Congress not because I wanted to be somebody, but because I wanted to do something. In fact, I wanted to do a great many big things. With so many millions of Americans struggling to find a job and economic security, I wanted to get this economy growing and get our country back to work. With so many small businesses finding it harder and harder to keep their doors open each and every day, I wanted to fight for small business owners like myself and make sure that the federal government did a better job of helping to create an environment where small businesses and entrepreneurs can succeed. With our country buried in debt and the problem only scheduled to get worse, I wanted to rein in the reckless overspending in Washington, D.C., and advance big solutions so that my children, so that our children could be free to reach their potential without previous generations' debt obligations holding them back. With threats to our national security growing by the day, and with an Iranian regime defiantly pursuing its nuclear ambitions, I wanted to be not just a vote in the United States Congress, but a leading voice. I wanted to be a true champion advancing vital measures to keep our nation and our allies strong and secure. With the 10th District serving as home to so many great communities, great businesses, great schools, passionate leaders throughout our communities, bright people, and treasured natural resources, I wanted to provide the thoughtful, independent leadership in Congress that our district has had and so richly deserves. And with our nation seemingly torn apart by hyper-partisan politics and gridlock, I wanted to prove that we could still get things done if we are serious about working together in good faith and finding common ground solutions to move our country forward. We've certainly gone through tough times recently, but I've always believed in the resiliency of the American people to make things better. We have been able to achieve great things because our natural instinct is to aspire to achieve great things. This is why I am here, and this is why I've worked to accomplish each and every day while I've been in office. Now, these past years, we made sure to hit the ground running because that's what the 10th District expects. Stretching north along Lake Michigan, the New Trier Township, Wilmette, Kenilworth, Winnetka, and Glencoe, to North Chicago and Waukegan, from Libertyville south to Glenview and Wheeling, Arlington Heights and Palatine east to Lake Forest and Lake Bluff, and Highland Park west through Deerfield, Buffalo Grove, and Long Grove. I've been fortunate to represent a diverse congressional district that asks its leaders in Washington to tackle a wide-ranging and ambitious agenda. And with the help of so many good people and coalitions, both at home in the 10th District and here in the United States Congress, we've been able to achieve a number of things that I will forever be proud of. In the House of Representatives, we've kept a sustained focus on job creation and on creating a climate that better helps the private sector grow. I believe that this represents the best path to ensuring sustained economic opportunity and upward mobility for millions of Americans. The House has passed over 30 bills that focus on job creation, and I'm pleased that the House unanimously passed a jobs-focused initiative that I introduced, the Global Investment in American Jobs Act. This bill earned strong bipartisan support, and I look forward to it hopefully getting signed into law before year end. But our efforts to help get people back to work most obviously don't start and end with legislation in Washington, D.C. Washington doesn't create jobs. The private sector, entrepreneurs, and small businesses do. That's why over the course of the last 2 years, we put together a 10th District task force focused on jobs and also hosted several highly successful jobs fairs back at home. These jobs fairs brought together local hiring employers with hundreds of job seekers and made a real impact on people's lives. We also organized and hosted educational events with local exporters and manufacturers, exposing them to how they can leverage the Export-Import Bank, and new markets opened up by the passage of new trade agreements to grow their businesses and create new jobs right here at home. I supported these things because I want to do everything I can to help businesses and workers in the 10th District and around the country succeed. I've been proud that my time in Congress has allowed me to continue to champion the cause of small business growth, to make sure that small businesses know that they always have a strong advocate for their issues with me in the United States Congress. Over the past few years, I've had the pleasure of touring and visiting literally thousands of small businesses in the 10th District of Illinois. To do this, I do this so that I can hear directly from our local business community, and more importantly, the thousands of constituents who work in these businesses, about what Washington can do better to help them. We did employee town halls at places like the Dual Company in Wheeling, Colbert Packaging in Lake Forest, and Hollister in Libertyville. We talked ideas with business leaders like Steve Kapp of Laser Age Technology, Richard Zick of Dynamax, and Jerry Larson of Larson Marine, Matt Eggemeyer of Keats Manufacturing, just to name a few. And I always enjoyed visiting with our community's many storefront business owners, whether on Milwaukee Avenue in Libertyville, or in downtown Arlington Heights, or on one of the many beautiful main streets throughout the district. To some, the big issue was making sure that we had smarter, better crafted regulations that take into account the unique nature of a particular industry. On this front, we've passed regulatory reform bills to improve the quality of this process and written letters directly to federal agencies to ensure that the rules are responsible and not excessively burdensome. We need regulation. We just want that regulation to be smart regulation and tailored regulation, not simply more of it. Many employers talk to me about the importance of increasing manufacturing and trade opportunities. I've been very happy to advance these issues in Congress as part of a trade working group, and know that the trade agreements we passed with South Korea, Panama, and Colombia are already having and will continue to have a positive impact on manufacturers in the 10th District and around the country. I'm also pleased that we recently made progress on improving opportunities with Russia, but we have much more work to do in order to level the playing field regarding trade. Other small businesses talk to me about the need to have a highly skilled workforce that is better trained and prepared to take jobs in the 21st century. Out of this grew my legislation, the Back to Work Blueprint Act, which would inject a new idea into improving the federal workforce training program and ensure that skills developed by workers match with the needs of the employer. These conversations with small business owners also strengthen my belief that we need to continue the promotion of STEM education in America's schools: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, skills necessary to make sure students are prepared to take jobs in the 21st century. Nearly every business owner shared the importance, Mr. Speaker, of access to capital and credit for their businesses. Capital is the lifeblood of our economy, and I'm pleased that we focused in on this in this Congress with the passage of the Jobs Act and other legislation that came out of the Financial Services Committee. Of course, many employers and small business owners and individual workers talked with us about the importance of keeping tax burden low and making sure that our tax code was fairer and simpler. Over the past 2 years, I've been proud to champion this through my active support for comprehensive reform that is focused on low rates, eliminating the lobbyist loopholes, broadening the base, and focusing on economic growth. I am confident that this will better help small businesses compete and create additional jobs. We also heard from many small business owners like Rick Woldenberg of Learning Resources in Vernon Hills on the need to repeal the expensive and burdensome 1099 provision, which would have placed another unwelcome hardship on small businesses. I was proud to get behind this issue very early on and was a co-sponsor of the legislation and saw its passage through into law. And finally, something we frequently heard from both workers and employers is the need for payroll tax relief. This is something which I proposed in legislation of my own and which I was pleased to support in a different piece of legislation to put more money into the pockets of hardworking Americans. In essence, what we heard from our local businesses over the past few years developed into what was my Main Street Jobs agenda, which I've talked at length about in this chamber. Its focus on pro-growth tax reform, increasing exports and manufacturing, access to capital for small businesses, making investments in infrastructure, utilizing domestic energy resources, STEM education, and implementing smarter regulations. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this remains the best recipe for getting our country back to work. Beyond our job creation efforts, I'm also proud of our leadership on confronting the nation's debt crisis. Though not always popular, I refuse to accept the status quo of no budgeting, skyrocketing debt, and a sustained indifference to the reality that ignoring the problem only makes it worse. With over 40 cents now borrowed on every dollar spent by the federal government, this is both a current crisis and a future one as well. Last year alone, we spent more paying the interest on the debt than we spent on domestic priorities of education, transportation, and natural resource protection combined. This is unequivocally unsustainable, which is why I've dedicated much of my time and effort to reining in spending in Washington and championing a big bipartisan debt reduction agreement. I'm very proud of our efforts to introduce the first bipartisan budget in a generation. I want to thank Steve LaTourette and Jim Cooper for their efforts and leadership on this. I also want to thank Congressman Quigley for working with me to co-sponsor and advance this legislation, which is based on the bipartisan Simpson-Bowles framework. Mr. Speaker, this budget ultimately failed to pass the House, but I remain proud of our bipartisan effort, for which the USA Today called us the Brave 38. And I believe that this type of thoughtful, independent leadership, this is the type of leadership that the 10th District deserves. I also believe that the courage and leadership shown by the House to take on the difficult but necessary position of reining in entitlement spending deserves recognition. We know that Medicare stands out as a primary driver of our debt in the future. And unfortunately, this future is not so far off. With one of Medicare's key programs scheduled to go bankrupt in the next 10 to 12 years, sustaining the status quo unavoidably means dramatic cuts down the road on those vulnerable Americans who need the program the most, crippling increases to the debt, and most likely both. Instead, I believe we have a generational obligation to ensure that our children's potential is not crushed by a debt burden born out of the inability to govern responsibly. Ultimately, something as big as Medicare reform requires broad bipartisan support. So that we are not there yet. We're not. But I do want to express my appreciation to Democratic Senator Ron Wyden and the House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan for recognizing that a solution must be found if we ever want to get this country on stable financial ground. While many can find fault and issues with any proposal, we as Americans must applaud and encourage bipartisan solutions. We must strengthen our social safety net and ensure its long-term viability. Of course, getting our debt under control impacts more than just what we do domestically. It impacts our ability to keep our homeland safe and free, and it impacts our power to provide leadership on the international stage. The 10th District has a history and a tradition of thoughtful global outlook and a special appreciation for the positive role American leadership can and must play in the world. This is a responsibility that I fully embrace and advanced. I've been honored to work with the Armenian American community to advance the Armenian Genocide Recognition Resolution here in this Congress. I want to especially thank Ken Kachigian, Ari Killian, and Greg Bedian, and all the people at All Saints Church and the Armenian Cultural Center in Glenview, Illinois, for their support and in educating me about their key issues and concerns. I also want to recognize the Baha'i community in the 10th District, which helped me build support for the resolution I introduced, bringing attention to the horrible mistreatment and atrocities of the Baha'i people persecuted in Iran. We put together a Human Rights Advisory Board which allowed us to better speak out about the mistreatment of religious minorities in Pakistan and in Bangladesh, especially in the Hindu community. And we supported numerous initiatives aimed at addressing human rights abuses taking place in Africa. I especially want to thank Dr. Richard Benkin for his commitment and help with regard to this area. And of course, we also focused on human rights and democracy promotion inside of Iran. But our work in Iran obviously did not stop there. Mr. Speaker, in my very first speech on this House floor, I said that Iran posed the #1 security threat to the United States. And thanks to the advice and counsel of so many good people in the 10th District of Illinois, community leaders like Sandy Pearl, Keith Shapiro, the late Richard Schoenstatt, Janet Ngati Cohn, Karen Garber, Maury Silverman and Lori Komisar, Richard Stein, Andy Hochberg, Steve Lavin, Rick Baccarat, Rabbi Aaron Melman, Peggy Shapiro, Rabbi Victor Weisberg, Mark Sachs, Steve Hefter, Andy Lappin, and so many more. Thanks to their passion, we continue to work on preventing this Iranian regime from acquiring a nuclear weapons capability. We advanced many vital measures in this Congress on this issue, and I've been pleased to have the opportunity to act as a leading voice and a champion in Congress for strengthening the sanctions on Iran. So much energy has gone into these efforts, not just from me, but from many members. And I will continue to urge that the United States ratchet up the pressure on Iran's nuclear ambitions until the threat is affirmatively and effectively dismantled. Another focus of mine has been finding ways to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, whether it has been delivering speeches from the floor of the House chamber, drafting and introducing resolutions affirming Israel's right to a secure border, traveling to Israel and meeting with Israeli officials, authoring letters and recruiting other members to sign on and support, such as an early effort we led to show the commitment of House freshmen to fully fund our foreign aid commitment to Israel, including Iron Dome in a tough budget climate, or co-sponsoring and voting for critical legislation. I've looked to provide true leadership in support of our ally Israel's long-term security. Finally, I've looked to provide the 10th District with thoughtful independent leadership in Congress, which it has had and I believe deserves. Our district is bound by deep-rooted characteristics, namely a desire for pragmatic, effective leadership, vigorous independence, and the ability to work with one side of the aisle, with the other side of the aisle, in a civilized and bipartisan manner. On this, I'd like to especially recognize my two most recent predecessors for this seat, Senator Mark Kirk and John Porter. These men have served as valued mentors and friends, and I've worked to carry on a proud legacy that they burnish for the 10th District. John Porter and now Senator Kirk have helped me in ways greater than they even know, and I'm deeply honored to consider them my friends. To this day, they continue to care deeply about the people of the 10th District of Illinois. The quality of who they are and what they achieved is reflected in the appreciation that our area still has for these two incredible men. They set the standard by which the 10th District leadership is measured, and I cannot thank them enough. The thoughtful, independent leadership that John Porter and Mark Kirk embodied are the same virtues that I pledged to advance as I began my service to the people of the 10th District. And I'm proud to stand here today and say that I believe that I have made good on this commitment. On a number of issues ranging from the environment, education, stem cell research, Title X funding and women's health, gun control, and transportation infrastructure, I've never been afraid to break from my party and do what I believe is best for my constituents and my district. This is why I've consistently been ranked and considered as one of the most independent and bipartisan members of this body. Mr. Speaker, as an Eagle Scout, my Scoutmasters Lee Getcho, Charlie Barnes, and Artie Bergman taught me to respect and love the outdoors, which is why I especially want to highlight our work to protect Lake Michigan. Beginning with the first bill I introduced in the House, the Great Lakes Water Protection Act, along with my good friend Dan Lipinski, Senators Mark Kirk, and Dick Durbin, I'm proud of our efforts to keep Lake Michigan clean. This legislation would prohibit wastewater pollution from running into the Great Lakes. But our work to protect the 10th District's most cherished natural resource did not stop there. We focused in on supporting Great Lakes Restoration Initiative through authoring and supporting funding amendments and advocating for the GLRI's importance and testimony before the House Budget Committee, all to make sure that this important program to protect the Great Lakes is adequately funded. On a more local level, I'm proud that we've finally been able to facilitate the cleanup of Waukegan Harbor. The Superfund site, which our community has been trying to restore and clean up for more than 20 years, has finally started under our watch. So much work into getting this accomplished has happened, and I particularly want to highlight and thank Susie Schreiber, Jerry Larson, and Cam Davis for their dedicated service to cleaning up the Waukegan Harbor. Getting finally Lake County's gateway to the Great Lakes delisted as an area of concern by the EPA. I also want to quickly highlight another cause which I've been proud to champion, and that's STEM education. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These are critical educational fields that we need to make sure our young students are not only exposed to, but have the tools to excel and compete in the global marketplace. This means giving these core areas extra attention. And on that, I'd like to highlight the great work and dedication that Dr. Laz Lopez has given. As the principal of Wheeling High School, Dr. Lopez is ahead of the curve in advancing STEM education among his students, and I believe is a model for students around the country. He's helped me greatly and has taken on a task of heading up my educational advisory board, and for that I will forever be grateful. In closing, it has been one of the greatest honors of my life to represent the people of the 10th Congressional District in the 112th Congress. I've never forgotten where I came from and what I came here to accomplish, and the importance of governing for the people. And while I'll miss many things, Mr. Speaker, I will miss most of all the many friends that I've made on both sides of the aisle, and my dedicated and talented staff, some of which are here this evening. Eric Bergeson, my chief, Kelly Folino, Kim Brisky, Philippe Malin, David Stern, Chris Denzel, Eric DiSilvestro, Hab Siam, Eric Miller, Daniel Sirota, Mona Dooley, Stephanie Zimmerman, Mike Trekovich, Jack Hayden, and Brian Reed. They all work tirelessly for the constituents of the 10th District, and I'm proud to call them my friends. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to seeing this next Congress address some big things, some big issues, because there's simply too much at stake. As I think about our nation's future, I'm reminded of a Winston Churchill quote: "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal, but it is the courage to continue that counts." Each Congress brings a new opportunity to write the next chapter in America's exceptional story. But we must always remember that nothing is given. America's greatness must continue to be earned. Our nation has built generation by generation through hard work and resiliency of the American people. And our generation must do our part to live up to this awesome responsibility. We must always be a country that stands for freedom and liberty, economic growth and opportunity for every American. And I remain optimistic that we can continue to make this country even better if we stay committed to these principles. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people of the 10th District for the opportunity and honor to represent them in the United States Congress.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011,